Alright, another draft physics video presentation. Comments, I guess, to start, and another crap and whatnot. Somebody keeps sending me form messages, that are, without any return address. And it's just the same old crap. There isn't anything called a counter argument provided or any kind of explanation for why it's incorrect. So he doesn't like the bulldozers. Yeah, he thinks that's a kind of a juvenile or immature analogy, and frankly, it doesn't matter. Analogies are supposed to make something clear. It makes it clear that in the universe, when you slow down something that's going the speed of light, you've taken some of its energy away from it, just because it's not moving the speed of light anymore. And that simple explanation provides an explanation for the existence of gravity. I mean, it just does. It provides a really good explanation for why more energy is going into the Earth than comes out of the Earth. And that's gravity, simply enough. More force. And so he can't show me an experiment, any piece of experimental evidence for which this explanation is inconsistent. So he's not going to tell me that, oh, well, this experiment demonstrates that that can't be the truth. Because it works. It's just a fact. So, yes, I'm going to continue using it because it's a very good analogy. I mean, I could just use people walking and whether they have to carry 20 pounds and they don't walk as fast when they're carrying a weight. I mean, it's not that complicated, and it makes it really simple to understand that if force isn't just banging into things, that it's pushing them, literally. It's a very good explanation, and it is consistent with other experiments, which makes it even better, because it sort of explains why electrons run out of gas, why muons have a decay rate. Now, they call it decay, but it's not decaying like radioactive decay. It's decaying in the sense that it's terminating, it's stopping its voyage, it's ending its voyage. Its velocity is degraded. And, simple answer is because it's being pushed. It's being pushed by, say, a gamma ray, for example. And there's the electron, and then there's the bits of force in a high frequency. So they're close together, and they're pushing it. And as they push it into the drag, into the rest of the energy in the universe, that's slowly reflecting, and it finally runs out of gamma ray. It runs out of the X-ray or gamma ray that's pushing it. And that's its little story. So again, this argument without any counter argument is just petty and stupid. And so I have in the past already talked about this, but he takes a quote from what is the pop culture. I mean, my whole argument is that this pop culture physics is full of lies and deceptions and propaganda. It's just as bad as the religious people holding up the Shroud of Turin and talking about how it passed the test. They found mud that's 10,000 years old on it. Some kind of horse shit, right? Some sort of nonsense story. And that's all this stuff is. It's just hype, exaggeration. I mean, I've made these accusations. There's no counter argument how there's any better explanation. I mean, I'd say some of it just gets to the point. There's a point where you have to say it's overt lies, right? I mean, we have the NASA scientist, what's his name? Shit, I just remembered it a moment ago. But anyway, who basically points out, look, they've never seen any light bent outside the sun's corona. Just a fact. Okay, they don't have any experiments to demonstrate light bending outside the corona. So they haven't done it. They haven't been able to do any Eddington experiment because they've never seen it. It doesn't work. It doesn't happen. Now, they don't want to publish that, because I guess that would be some sort of challenge to a lot of beliefs they are invested in already. And so they don't. And so that's sort of lying, isn't it? When you know something and you don't tell everybody, that's the same as a lie. So I'd say that, yes, NASA has tried the Eddington experiment because, look, 400 times better resolution from space. 400 times. Your telescope is 400 times better. 400 times longer. 400 times bigger. It's just a huge advantage. And to think NASA didn't take that huge advantage and use it, and come on. Of course they have. Well, anyway, let's just read this piece of hype. All right. And you have to put it in this context and say, well, what's the explanation? I mean, why haven't they repeated it from space? I mean, it's an important experiment. I mean, they took a hammer, a regular hammer, all right, and, to the moon. And everything. They had to measure the weight of every single thing in the spaceship. I mean, it's just critical that they get all these weights right to have this thing land right, to do anything right. So they took a hammer, deliberately took a hammer to space to show you the, a hammer falling at the same rate as a feather because of the absence of atmosphere on the moon. So they duplicated that experiment. You don't think there's some incentive to duplicate the Eddington experiment with real hardware, with a real telescope? So anyway, so this guy, during the perfect eclipse over North America, the perfect one, the 12 noon perfect eclipse, you couldn't get a better eclipse, you couldn't get better weather, and the only guy who did the experiment is some amateur. I mean, isn't this just so telling? All of this hardware, all of these telescopes better than Eddington's they could have done the experiment with, and some guy with much less than Eddington's telescope, right? A tiny percentage of his telescope. A 5-inch telescope versus a 12-inch telescope. A 12-foot long telescope versus a 3-foot long telescope. Huge degrade, okay, in the quality of the instrument. All right, anyway. Recreation of Eddington experiment. Dr. Burns receives the American Astronomical Society's Chambliss Award, Achievement Award, Amateur Achievement Award. So, I mean, who's in the American Astronomical Society in the first place? And it's not a peer review. It's not anything. Doesn't mean anything. So a group of other amateurs gave an amateur guy an award. Wow, that's so incredible. Anyway, for his successful recreation and improvement upon. So this is what they say. So you use a telescope that's far inferior. You use a camera that's far inferior. I mean, Eddington's using photographic plates, insanely good resolution. Eddington was hoping for 10,000 stars. He only got 1,000, which is pretty bad. This guy's got 50. Okay, 50. Come on. All right. Improvement upon Eddington's iconic deflection of light experiment during the 2017 total eclipse, solar eclipse, which represents a tour de force in careful observing. So let's understand, he didn't even use a real control image. He used the synthetic computer-generated image of the sky to compare it to. So he's comparing his image to a computer-generated, I think this is what it would look like from your location, image. Please. And that's doing the experiment better. Yeah. I'm sorry. I mean, this is so pathetic. And so this is what science has become. Any asshole saying any kind of crap, and you all just sit there and say, yeah, that's really good proof. I saw it. I went to the paper and I read it. Did you actually read the paper? Did you actually look at the tiny samples he gives of his images? They're like a 640 by 480 resolution. It's horrible. I mean, he doesn't give us anything, to sit there and look at it and say, oh, this is what the two things you were comparing? Nothing. Blurry little pixelated blobs. Just no evidence that any of this was in any way a high enough quality to make the measurement required. Just no evidence of that. All right. Careful observing and calibration, and he gives a link. An amateur astronomer proved on the famous 1919 experiment after collecting data during the Great American Eclipse. So again, another link. All right, so this is what they say should be convincing evidence. All right, I should believe that this is a better experiment, even though the telescope was inferior, the comparison wasn't even to real images, the photographic equipment just isn't good enough, and I should believe. Oh, okay. Well, I don't. Sorry. No sale. but I've already been over it. But this is what it comes to, right? This is their argument. We have this really great science that isn't really great. They tell me I have to go get peer reviewed. Why didn't that have to get peer reviewed? So he's citing that crap that isn't peer reviewed. At least I haven't seen it in anything peer reviewed. And yet I have to somehow jump the hurdles before I get to have little headlines and get little amateur awards and all of that kind of crap. Yeah. Oh, I see the double standards. Oh, they're all over the place. It's disgusting. All right, so yeah, we'll do this a little bit of this slit guy. I mean, this is another. I couldn't believe this. This guy's got almost 1 million subscribers. You know, this video got 333, well, through 34,000 views. Okay, and it's just such absolute crap. He obviously doesn't know shit about the subject. He's just reading the headlines. You know, reading the dogma, the doctrine of the church. You know, full of just the same old crap. It's like the Sean Carroll, you know, mentioning detector experiments. It just doesn't make any sense at all. Nobody can passively detect photons or electrons. It's a silly proposition. Oh, well, anyway, just so bad. So the ads all over the place, of course. So I guess this guy wouldn't want $1,500 either. So Joe Scott, it's called, but it's I guess he likes to go by the slogan "Answers with Joe." Yeah, they're not good answers.
For today's video, I want to do a little...
And he's not at all interesting. So this is like the Pee Wee Herman thing going on in the universe or something. Everybody just falling in love with just average dupes. You know, your little pumpkins. I don't know. I don't get it. You don't have to have anything anymore. You don't have to come to the table with anything like charisma or any kind of anything.
Experiment. Follow the instructions in this video. What it's going to do is it's going to show you how to shine a laser through
Yeah, that looks like a really well-made experiment there. Yeah, that's really something. It's real impressive.
Tiny little slits and then project what that does against the wall. I really want you to try this because you should see with your own eyes the phenomena.
You could just tell them to put their little fingers together and they can see little lines between them forming. But actually, I think that's a completely different phenomenon. It's actually because of the focal problem. It's you have your fingers out of focus, and so you're seeing the surface of your finger in the other focal dimensions. So you're actually seeing the surface of your finger more than once, but all out of focus.
That has led to a series of discoveries that has challenged everything we know about light.
Oh, bullshit. You didn't know anything to start with, so nothing got challenged, and you've been listening to the same propaganda since the day you were hatched, fella. Okay? Because I heard the same propaganda since the day I was hatched. So you know this is the story you've been hearing your whole life. So don't pretend there was some, oh, everything changed. No, nothing changed for you. You heard this story, this silly propaganda, and that's all you've ever heard. And you've never looked at it for yourself. You've never thought about it. You've never dissected it. You've just accepted their silly little story. Where I alternatively said, oh, this is religion. Yeah, this isn't science anymore. They're just making this shit up.
Matter and reality itself.
Oh, yeah, sure. God, it's just so bad. Reality itself is somehow threatened because light scatters off of surfaces. Shit. Oh, that sure makes it clear. Joe's the guy, ain't he? He is the man. Ha ha. MLP Loogie. What the fuck does that mean? Oh, I guess that was the guy's name. Can you make a video on the double slit experiment? I've only seen 6 million of them. Couldn't you do 6 million in one? Please? And make sure it has full of bullshit, because I love bullshit. Please? Bullshit to me, please.
For answer file, MLP Luigi said, "Can you do a video on the double slit experiment?" Yes, I can.
But it won't be accurate and won't have anything to do with the truth, and I won't detail all of the problems with our analysis and the fact that the math doesn't match the drawings and it's all a pile of shit. But I can do it. I can just talk shit like all the other fake physicists.
Oh, right, here we go.
Yes, we must have humor, please. Well, okay. Sometimes I'm humorous, but it has nothing to do with intention. I'm never funny on purpose. Just remember that.
Step in the Wayback Machine to the late 1600s, where it was pretty much settled science that light traveled as a particle. There have been a lot of experiments.
But there was no explanation of the particle. They didn't get it, okay? It was idea was is that it was clumpy, okay? That was what they said. Newton said corpuscle, all right? But the idea was clumpy. It went from one place to another place as a thing, say, photon. But, you know, recognizing the fact that it has a frequency, once that was established, well, it's hard to call something that has a frequency a clump, now, isn't it? I mean, that doesn't make too much sense, right? I mean, if we actually said cats had frequency because their head was separated from their body, was separated from their tail, and there was a frequency. So when the cat came, the head would come first, and then the body, and then the tail, and there'd be this little vibrational frequency. That's a frequency, right? So yes, cats are still cats, but the idea is, and photons are still photons, but the idea is that it goes one step deeper. Okay, just like the atom is electrons and protons, the photon, the thing we call a photon, isn't just one thing and it just goes instantaneously, hits a surface and goes, I'm a photon. No, it's a sequence of events. And the sequence can be caused by lots of different things that are happening can create that sequence. There can be heads coming from one place and torsos coming from another place and tails coming from another place. So photons can be broken into little pieces, heads, torsos, and tails, and then they can be recombined. Now that would be the rational maturity of the particle theory. The particle theory doesn't have to stay in the caveman box, okay, you know, with rocks and clubs. It can elevate and become mature as an argument that yes, frequency is a real thing, this is a real phenomenon, and a photon is, yes, the composite object that's made of the components that have the frequency. But no, don't do that. Don't concede that there can be an evolution in understanding. Force everybody to talk in 1600 terms and never, ever, ever, ever go any further. Oh, okay. No, that would be stupid.
To back this up, and it even had the support of Sir Isaac Newton, and he was not known to be wrong about things. But then a physicist...
Yeah, he was. He was way off about this whole fucking God crap. this angel theories is that mush. Yeah, way the fuck off. Not even close to the accurate. Yeah.
Named Thomas Young created the double slit experiment.
All right, he created it, you know, like it's some sort of brilliant creation. So let's understand, Newton had done the two external surface experiments and found, oh, the light is changed. It bends, it goes crookedy. Okay, and they did the two inside, the aperture experiment, and found, hey, light goes crookedy and creates rings called Newton's rings, right? So Newton had already done the experiments to demonstrate that surfaces are causing phenomenon. So that was the, yes, you know, so Young, more than 100 years later, decides that he's going to do an experiment that doesn't have any huge significance except to people who knew that, you know, waves, water waves and sound waves, you could create two sources this way by making openings, and you could send the waves through two sources at the same time. And there was this thing called interference where the pressure would actually move through mediums, and you could even watch it happening with water waves. You could watch it actually happening. And he attempted to make an analogy between that and light. But the analogy fails. It fails dismally in the single slit. I mean, just colossally fails to work. You know, in water, there's no comparison, and sound.
experiment. And it consisted of a box through which light traveled through two very tiny slits.
Right, so they don't have to be very tiny. They can be a half a millimeter. Okay, that's not very, it's small, but it's not very tiny. And you get lots and lots of little bars close to each other. A very good pattern you can get with a very open slit. So again, more chicanery around the subject, like say, somehow the only way this works is doing it this one way. And the reason why they do it this one way is because mathematically it nullifies the experiment in a sense. It makes their math capable of working. Their math only works, right? Their drawing only works if they make the slit infinitesimally small. It completely fails to be accurate when it gets any larger than that. And all it's really about is the fact that they're really taking away the significance of the distance of the surfaces. So the closer you make the surfaces, the more impossible it would be to see the difference between the two surfaces. Whatever pattern they create falls right on top of each other, and you'd never be able to see it. And that's the only reason they emphasize this. You get more pattern, you get more interesting stuff happening the wider you make the slits. The more wavelengths, the more that goes on. So it's just, it's nonsense. So he just plays clips from Veritasium's video. So this is the whole problem with science, right? Is one bad scientist does some bad science, and then the next guy just copies and duplicates and uses his bad science as propaganda. Just like I'm being told I have to believe light is bent twice as much by gravity because some amateur astronomer did a really poor experiment with bad equipment. And I'm supposed to be totally convinced. No, I'm totally convinced by the fact that the resolution from space is 400 times better. And in the 50 years we've been in space, nobody's done the experiment? Oh, please.
And then a little eye hole where he could look in and see what that did when it projected to the other side of the box. The thinking was that if it
So the truth is that people have gone to the actual papers written by these people, and they still can't find exactly how Young did his experiment. So they're just making this part up too. There's no diagrams, there's no nothing. They have to just sort of piece it together. But there's no explicit, this is the experiment I did.
traveled like a particle, it would create two parallel lines on the other side of the box.
Right, and no, it wouldn't. So again, if particles you actually did this experiment, and you shot little pieces of especially light stuff like styrofoam or something, they'd be bouncing all over the place off these surfaces. These surfaces would create a pattern of diffraction all over this board. Be all over the place. Okay? Just a fact. And if you had any understanding, if the narrower the slit is compared to the size of the ball, the more likely it is they're going to crash into the side of the thing a little bit here and there, and they're going to get deflected. So again, they're just more lies. Scatter is a real thing happening all the time. I mean, the irony is where these little balls are hitting, frankly, you're seeing them, right? So when we see the pattern with our own eyes, you have to recognize that pattern you're seeing, you could also see from over here. There's actually a whole bunch of photons going over there, and there's photons going over there, and there's photons going over there. You can see it from any angle. So you're only seeing a tiny percentage of the actual number of photons that are actually hitting the surface. You're seeing just a tiny percentage of them. That's how much light is actually hitting that surface. And you're not appreciating that you're only getting part of the image back. You're not getting the full intensity of the light that actually hit the surface. What you're seeing is just a percentage of it, a tiny percentage of it.
Because it was projecting through those lines, just like bowling balls flying through.
So the point is that the reflection is also scattering. The reflection isn't coming right back, just one hey, it goes this way and it comes right back to me, and it doesn't go anywhere else. Just like the stuff in a mirror goes all kinds of different places. That's why mirrors are duller. Okay, the image is a little bit less bright than the rest of the world. It's because you're only seeing one portion of the light that actually is reflecting. Only a portion of the image that goes in comes right straight back. A lot of it goes this way and that way and all kinds of other ways. So you're not getting the full photon complement. You're getting a dull version of the reality, a dim version.
Pins at the end of the bowling lane. But that's not what happened. What he saw instead was the same strange pattern of lines that...
So again, it's not pattern of lines. He's not even describing his own. He's putting an image on here, and then he doesn't even describe the image he's actually dealing with. Okay, because yes, Young's image was very blobby. Because he was using the sunlight. It's got the red and the blue is, blending into each other. But you can see that there's obviously breaks here. We don't know if Young actually saw those, though. I don't know if he actually described them as existing. So, Young's analysis, two waves won't create that pattern. Two waves can't do that. All right? I mean, let's just emphasize the point. This break in here and this break in here can't be in any way mathematically, sensibly, rationally accounted for with two-wave interference. Young's drawing is just two waves coming out of two openings. It's completely incapable of describing this pattern. It won't work. It fails to describe. It fails to explain the pattern. Yeah, that's all I wanted to do. Yeah, I'll go back to the video.
You're seeing in this experiment. Young recognized what he was seeing right away. It's an interference.
Yeah, well, Young was an audio scientist. Most of the work he did was in sound waves. So, yes, this was clearly his prejudice, so to speak. All right, so, but again, it's the simplest pattern you can make in the universe, on and off. You can't make a simpler pattern, right? Anybody got an argument that there's some simpler pattern than on and off? No, there's no simpler pattern. And it would be kind of silly for people to think every time the simple pattern shows up, it has to be only one thing could cause it. That would be kind of silly.
Interference pattern. You see, when waves combine, it creates what's called interference. Like if you take waves in water, when they hit each...
Right. Well, this won't work, okay? Mathematically, this will not create the pattern. So two sources, two waves doesn't work. So, and it really is just about the surfaces. The single slit is the two-surface experiment. The math says, what's the significant variable? Oh, it's the distance between the two sources. So there's two sources in the single slit. There's two sources in the single impediment. One side and the other side. They're the ones creating all the interesting fringe material. Everything that goes through the middle of the slit isn't interrupted. The stuff going near the edges is the stuff being disturbed. That's why you get more and more pattern, okay, spreading, the smaller and smaller you make the slit, because a higher percentage of the light is now interacting with the surface. So it's just interacting with surface that causes the effect. It's nothing to do with waves.
Other, the peaks will combine to create taller peaks, and the peaks and troughs will cancel each other out, which creates this pattern of higher peaks and then...
No, it creates a pattern of high, low, on, off, on, off, on, off, on, off, right? So it's not even the same mechanical pattern, right? What they're showing here isn't what the slits do at all. They create a continuous on and a continuous off. This is saying, no, the middle thing goes on and off, on, off, on, off, on, off, and the thing next to it does nothing. Just stays, nothing. And then on, off, on, off, on, off, right? So it's not even the same. But again, you can't do it. This doesn't work. This isn't the double slit pattern. It's not. So why do they say it's the same thing when it's not the same pattern?
Stillness. And when that gets projected against a surface, you get the weird double slit experiment pattern.
Again, you don't get it. It's not the same pattern. The intensities are way off, and certainly in the single slit, it's nowhere even close.
This only happens if light is traveling as a wave.
Right, so more bullshit. Okay, so they did this fake experiment where they shot, projectiles through two slits. If they did it with tennis balls, they know some of the tennis balls are going to go in all kinds of directions because they're going to hit the edge of the surface just a little bit. So they know it's not true. They just pretend this is the only way anything can ever happen is through this theory of theirs, and it's just not true. They haven't tried to do it any other way. They haven't tried to understand it any other way. They're just religious kooks saying, I just want to hear about what verifies my theory. What verifies? What vindicates? I'll ignore all other evidence. I'll ignore the single slit because that's not good. That doesn't show what I want to show. So I'll only show what verifies my point. I will not show what doesn't verify it. So that's that simple. It's just propaganda for a religion.
That's the only explanation for this.
See, I mean, that's just way excessive rhetoric. You haven't proven that. You didn't demonstrate that. You haven't shown me all the work you did on the blackboard to try any other kind of explanation. You haven't shown me anything you attempted to do to make this a proof. You haven't shown how you excluded all these other theories automatically. Somehow you excluded them all. And this is the only way it can be explained. It can't be explained any other way. And you know that because you tried to explain it all the other possible ways. You never did any of this. This is just such excessive rhetoric. And why be so excessive? Only people who are incredibly insecure about their argument start exaggerating, right? When you got the goods, you don't have to be, you don't have to do this hypey stuff. You don't have to pretend you're great. You'll prove you're great. So again, this is just what desperate people do, is exaggerate.
The test was replicated hundreds of different ways in the years following this.
It wasn't more horseshit. Yes, it was definitely redone, the same experiment over and over again. And did anybody ever really do it in any clinical way? No. No, hell with that. Hell with actually measuring and doing all that stuff. We'll just say it's close enough. We'll do small angle approximations. We'll say that two lines that obviously are not parallel are parallel. They actually do that. Oh, they're close enough to parallel. You know. Amazing crap.
Discovery, and even Isaac Newton himself had to concede that yes.
Oh, I mean, amazing. So he uses the Young experiment and then talks about Isaac Newton. I mean, an experiment that happened 150 years after Isaac Newton was dead, and he's going to bring that up as somehow evidence, well, 100 years, as evidence that Isaac Newton was convinced. Oh, how pathetic.
Light can travel as a wave, but other experiments showed it.
So we don't really have any evidence of that, so I don't know where he got that from. That where did Newton say, well, light could travel as a wave? I haven't heard that quote anywhere. I didn't see that one anywhere.
Traveling as a particle. So what is it, light? Are you a wave or a particle? This particle-wave duality became known over time as, well, the particle-wave duality. And it was...
Yeah, isn't that cute? So everybody ought to just say right there, oh, okay, so you totally don't know what you're talking about. The God is not duality. Yeah, sure. He's in a superposition of existing and not existing. Sure he is.
The mystery that confounded science for the next 200 years. By the 1920s, the physics community had much better instruments at their disposal, and they decided to add another...
It was 100 years, actually, but whatever. So, yes, doing the experiment better meant that, oh, it's more complicated than we thought, and oh, this simple two-wave shit isn't going to work. Doesn't work. Plainly doesn't work.
Layer to the double slit experiment. You'll see this over and over again, experiments building on top of other experiments, increasing in complexity. And weird.
Yes, and what you'll see is that they couldn't explain the simple experiment accurately, right? They had to lie about that one, and then they make a more complex version, and it already has a whole bunch of lies it's already built on, and then they pile on a few more lies. So none of this is, by the time you get to LIGO, you have an experiment that is just so full of bullshit that there's no reality left in it.
So the new twist on the experiment was basically asking the question that if the photons were behaving as waves and colliding with each other on the other side of the slit...
Oh, it's just a silly thing to even say. Just no evidence you can do that.
What would happen if you fired the photons through one at a time? The guess is that you would get the particle pattern of two complementary parallel lines.
The guess is, but see again, okay, so you should guess first and then force it to rewrite. because that's what the evidence indicates. Now, all we can say that somebody tried this experiment, some French guy, there's a story about it, but there's no evidence. So there's no photographic plates, there's no nothing, there's no evidence you can find anywhere. I couldn't find any evidence of it. But there's some story that it was done, okay? And he did it deliberately well, in the sense that he let the photons collect over a month. A month. Maybe more than that, actually. He went sailing. Turned the experiment on and then went sailing. That's the story. And then came back and looked at his photographic film. So he really guaranteed that there wasn't much going on, because, it barely exposed his photographic film. So whatever was coming through the experiment was a tiny amount of stuff, because, it's a really long time to wait between photons. And all of the modern versions happen in 5 minutes, okay? They're not doing anything that even took a week. They're not even taking a day. They're taking a matter of moments and then saying, oh, I've done this very long exposure experiment, when they didn't do a long exposure experiment. Because the truth is, they can't duplicate the French experiment. So it's another one of these experiments they haven't redone. Why haven't they redone it? It's not that simple. It's not that complicated, right? You set up a film on you have a light source that's consistent, and then you just have some sort of opaque surface in its way, and you just make the sand the opaque surface until some light gets through. You get some photon, something that says, okay, some of the light from here got through the barrier and got to here. All right, and as soon as you get an indication of any light at all, you say, okay, that's it. And it's a tiny amount of light, tiny amount of photons, but it's enough. And then you let that sit for a while, that experiment sit and do its thing. There's a scientific process. Nobody wants to obey any scientific process. Nobody wants to do a control. Nobody wants to do any of the real thing that makes science have any integrity.
After all, how can you get a wave interference pattern when there's nothing to interfere with? So they gave it a try, and to everyone's shock and amazement.
All right, so again, more of this hype. Everyone. Who's everyone? So just more crap. And this is the famous, now, from my perspective, right, the Veritasium horseshit. 50% of his photons are error photons. And he's getting 7 of those a second, okay, with his detector. So clearly this experiment could only take a matter of seconds. Because look, these humps have to be made on this 50% of error photons. So how many seconds do you have to do the whole experiment? Oh, that's right, you don't have too many. So this is, again, an experiment that was first done over a month, and now they're doing it in mere seconds, and we're supposed to believe it's the same experiment. And that they've done everything they could to ensure that they're single photons. When they can't do this, they have a light source, a light bulb, and they turn it as dim as possible, right? So they're not obscuring the light, they're turning it down voltage-wise. And we don't know how how does light form? It forms because little surfaces of the material melt. They get too hot, and that's when the photons are created. And so maybe that happens in spurts. Like a volcano, little things open up and go blah, blah. Not little tiny ones. They have to be a certain size before they can open up and go, start spitting lava. So there's a size requirement. So what if the filament's doing exactly the same thing? It only shoots photons in clumps of 1,000 photons at a time. Well, then you have 1,000 photons in your experiment, right? It was only one blip, but if the one blip has 1,000 photons in it, then you don't have one photon in your experiment at a time, do you? No, you don't. So this is all such bad physics. Bad science. It's bad science. We know that science, you have to protect against all these things, and they're not doing any of that.
They still got the interference pattern. But how?
So it's not the right pattern, let's just say again, and he did it with this stupid rackety machine that somebody sells for $5,000. So for $5,000 you can buy this stupid device, that has a little crappy flashlight bulb in it and a couple of slits, and and then he's using a photo multiplier. And photo multipliers, you just turn up their voltage, and you can make them more and more sensitive. So you can just turn down their voltage and make them less sensitive. So if you don't want error photons, well, you just turn it down a notch, and then you won't get error photons.
How? There is nothing for that photon to be bumping into. What could it possibly be colliding with to create this pattern?
So it's not colliding with anything is the truth, right? So it's just about scatter. You're taking a sequence of events. There's soldiers in a very nice alignment. Well, they're frankly polarized, so they're a little bit out of alignment. But anyway, and then you're sending them through a little obstacle that sends the soldiers in different directions. And you're just relying on the fact that when another stream of soldiers go in, it's going to send them to mutually different directions. And in some places, those directions are going to be in phase again, and you're going to have the soldiers back in the right alignment. But that's what's happening. Nothing's interfering. You're just breaking photons and then remaking photons, which is perfectly consistent with most of the experimental evidence, which indicates that photons, any photon that interacts with an electron, you're not getting back exactly the same photon that left. The one that hits isn't the one you get back. And that's, every bit of science indicates that's the truth.
The answer? Itself. You see, somehow this photon was going through both slits at the same time and then colliding into itself on the other side of the barrier.
Yes, it's just a silly story that doesn't make any sense. And again, the photon is a single blob when we know it has a frequency. We know that this, whatever this is, it has a frequency built into it. So why would we think it's not made out of components at a frequency? Why isn't that the logical conclusion? If I wanted to give something a frequency, isn't that the easiest way to do it? I want to give a caterpillar a frequency. Isn't the easiest way to do it is just pull its head off, put it over here, separate its middle part, put one here, and then put its tail over here. Now I've given it a frequency. Is there a simpler way to do it? I don't think so.
And this revealed a fundamental truth about quantum mechanics.
It's just so, this hypey talk. There's no truth in this mechanics at all. It's all just hype and propaganda.
Waveform state, quantum objects exist in a probability state, meaning that...
So more mush. So no, that just means that, yes, there's a probability. So every time something goes in, the tennis ball goes near the edge of a surface, it can hit the surface a little, it can hit the surface a medium amount, it can hit the surface a lot. And the fact is all of those are probabilities, are all something that can happen, okay? Because I'm varying where the tennis ball goes in. So if I randomize where it goes in, then I know I'll get a random result in terms of where it'll come out. Not complicated at all.
At any given time, it could go through the left slit or the right slit or hit the barrier. While in a waveform state, that photon is all three at once. It is 33% in the left slit, 33% in the right slit, and 33% hitting the barrier.
All right, so what kind of moron would believe that? I mean, why? What are you believing in? It's just crazy. Oh, it's everywhere doing everything. Oh, no, it isn't.
Actually, that's incredibly simple math.
So you don't believe that if I throw dice on a dice table, you don't believe the dice are permeating every possible combination, and they're in every position that would create every possible combination, and they're on all those positions. You don't think the logical, simple truth that they hit surfaces and deflect at certain angles with certain momentum based on what they hit and how they hit it, and it's all just mechanically a structure, and there's just nothing to see here. I mean, it'd be nice to be able to see it, okay, but I'm just saying, we know there's no magic. Each roll will be independently different, and each one will be an actual path that has actual rational reasons why it took those paths and why it did what it did. It'll all be cause and effect.
There are highly complex equations out there that calculate probability states with
they don't do any of this, okay? They don't calculate any state. They don't do any of this. They do what I just described. They observe, and then they put the information into the equation to get the precise percentages. But I mean, it's not doing anything in terms of predicting anything more than you can just do the same thing by seeing how many faces on the dice are, and all I have to do is make some assumptions. I assume They're equally balanced. They have the equal weight. They have equal this, equal that. And then when I throw them into the experiment, I can be assured that I'm going to have a random result that'll come up even numbers. I can predict what happens. So again, this is just such nonsense that this equation does a damn thing. And just looking at it, you can see it doesn't do anything. There's two t's on this side, there's two t's on this side. There's forky thing here, forky thing here. There's nothing in here. It's not doing anything. It's just a bunch of garbage.
High degree of accuracy. But eventually
So more just statements, not any kind of rational reasoning explaining how it does it any more accurately than I can do it by surmising. I can watch a roulette wheel, I can see the results, I can say, yes, that's perfectly consistent with what would be expected. It's a randomized system. There's so many variables, the variables are all mixing with each other, and no pattern wins.
the waveform has to go back down to a particle, and that's called the waveform collapsing.
Which is more nonsense, right? Because this collapsing thing is supposed to happen through any interaction with anything. So any time any bit of energy hits whatever this thing is, this piece of dye, it's already being measured. That's a measurement, essentially. So they believe that somehow these dice, these photons, can fly through space and do all of this stuff, and there's no fields or forces or mechanisms that are all interacting with them. Now, in the case of photons, I'd say it's true, actually. They don't give a shit about forces. There's no evidence that a force gives a shit about a force. But clearly electrons would be constantly bombarded. They can't go from point A to point B without getting constantly bombarded by your cell phone conversations and all the rest of the crap is in the atmosphere. Cosmic background radiation, this light from stars, cosmic rays, all kinds of stuff is flying in, hitting them all the time. So they can't go through the experiment and say, I'm superimposed, I'm doing 4 million calculations at once. No, they're going to be caught all the time. They're going to be forced to collapse all the time into one thing. All the time it's going to be happening. There's no place for the Schrodinger cat to hide from the cosmic rays that are already photographing it, that are already measuring it all the time. I don't even know why this is even a possible theory, why they even talk about it. It's making any sense. Nothing that we are saying has this superposition crap could ever be in an environment where it's not being measured constantly.
In the case of the double slit experiment, that happens when it hits the back wall. And this experiment has been replicated.
So again, it's just such a silly argument. Oh, that's the interaction that means something. So all the cosmic rays that hit the electron, all the other stuff that hit the electron, that didn't mean anything. The only thing that means something is when it hit another electron. Shit.
Over and over and over again, even with different particles like photons, electrons, protons, even...
Right, we know they didn't do that. So again, that's just more lies. And they don't do the same experiment, and they don't get the same results, and it's just a pile of crap.
Pull atoms and molecules. So...
Right, and go look at the results of those experiments. I mean, I haven't gone through all the details, but frankly, you can't even understand how they shoot the particle, what the slits are. None of it makes any sense, but they're saying it's the same experiment with the same results, and it's not.
Now we know that fundamental elements of matter can pop in and out of existence.
Right, we know this. Now we don't know any of this. So again, I mean, why would anyone believe it? It's a religious story. It's preposterous bullshit. Why don't you just say we know the aliens are controlling us? They have thought waves that are controlling our thoughts and making us look stupid and ridiculous. Fuck you.
Probability states. But that's where things just start getting weird. Because for the next evolution of the double slit experiment, they wanted to see if they could measure the probability states as they went through the slits. So
right, they could measure something. They can't measure any of this stuff. They can't detect any of this stuff. It's just such a pile of crap.
They set up a little detector on one of
No, there's no detectors.
the slits to see if they could measure it. This was called the which way experiment. The results shook scientific understanding to its core.
All right, never happened, so I don't know how it ever did that. I don't know how it shook anything when it never happened, but whatever. So somebody told a story about doing a detector experiment that never got done, and they just speculated about what the results would be. That's it. That's all that happened here. Feynman types or somebody sat down and somebody asked them, well, what if we detected the photon? If we could. Well, of course we can't. But what if we did? Well, then there wouldn't be any pattern, of course. I mean, that's that's the experiment that was done.
And remains unexplained to this very day.
Yeah, you can't explain something that didn't take place. So, yes, it's unexplained because it's complete lies. It's a complete fabrication. It's a completely made-up story.
Because this time, the pattern on the back of the wall displayed what you would expect with particles going through the slit.
So, this is, I'm just saying, it's just such a huge lie. It never happened. There's no evidence that any such experiment ever was conducted and that it exists anywhere and that there was any change in any patterns or any of this crap. It's just a silly story. And just logically, you can know if I tried to detect the electrons by, bouncing force off them, photons, I'd end up pushing the electrons in the direction, whatever direction the force is coming from. So I would be pushing them in a direction, so there should at least be a shifting of where they would end up being, because I'm pushing them quite obviously. I can't pull them with a photon. So obviously the impact is going to be a change in the pattern because I'm going to be influencing the electrons with energy. So this is just absolute nonsense.
That's 2 lines. No interference.
All right, just a big fat lie. I mean, it's just a lie, and he's just reciting it, and he's doing it with Dr. Quantum graphics. So, he's just using other people's science and saying that's real science. So, Dr. Quantum video, a video made by religious kooks. And so this guy with 1 million subscribers, is just selling religion.
Waves. This means that the waveform collapsed before it went through the slit. Why? Because it was being observed. This proved that the act of observing the particle
So again, the real physicists will at least now and then make it clear, well, we don't mean observe like your eyeball saw it. We mean observe in terms of an interaction. All interactions are the same. It doesn't matter whether you're looking through a camera, okay? It doesn't matter whether the flash bulb went off and your flash went into your camera and you took an actual picture. The fact that your flash bulb hit the electron is all there needs to be. It doesn't need anything more to be totally fucked up. So any interaction is an observation. Any. So the universe, the sun shining light, anything shining a force, a piece of radiation moving the speed of light, any radiation moving the speed of light from any source is an observation. It doesn't have to bounce off and go into their eyeball and them say, "Oh, I got a reflection back." No, it's still an observation.
Caused the waveform to collapse. How is this possible? How can it know that it's being observed? And what is the connection between the observation and the wave function?
It's just so bad. It's just so bad that no scientist, no real physicist says, I got to correct this. I've got to make some serious videos about how we have to clean this the fuck up. We got these dorks on the internet talking as if this is what our science says. And our science doesn't say this. It isn't that crazy. It's crazy and silly. I mean, it's got aliens, but it doesn't have any aliens like playing their trunk. They made that part up. There's no aliens with trunks where they, play their trunk, No. We didn't say that.
Causing it to collapse. This experiment has been repeated countless times to the exact same results.
Okay, it's such a lie. There's no detector experiment. You can't detect an electron. You can't detect a photon passively. There's no potential interactor. There's nothing you can interact with, an electron or a photon, and have any hope of interacting passively. It's just nothing that can do that.
And we have no explanation for this.
No, I just have no explanation for why, if physics took itself seriously, why they would just sit back and let somebody do this. If somebody was putting my name on this kind of crap, I'd be pissed. I'd be like, what the fuck? That's not my theory, you fucking cunt. What are you doing? What are you talking that shit for? But why isn't physics bothered? Because I think physics is all for. Make the story wackier and wackier. The wackier you make it, the more they like it. Because then it's more and more like a religion.
But wait, it gets weirder still. John Archibald Wheeler created a version of this experiment that he called delayed choice. Wish I had a cool name like Archibald. It gets pretty complicated, but the basic gist is that
the basic gist is that they pretend that it's the same experiment when it's nothing like it. Yeah, that's the basic gist. Basic gist is you don't have slits, you have a crystal. It creates two different photons, a blue, an ultraviolet one. You put an ultraviolet one in, you get two infrared ones out. That's it. And they're out of phase.
he puts a second barrier behind the first one, and through beam splitters and interferometers, he makes it so that the second barrier could be one slit or two. And he changes that while the photon is mid-flight. And what he found was that by changing
Right. One photon knew what the other photon was doing. No, it never happened. It's just horseshit.
the structure of the second slit, it altered the behavior of the particle at the first slit.
Right, so this is all just, like I said, he's wackily describing what the experiment actually produces. So there's just, what's the point?
In other words, the particle was being altered by things that hadn't happened yet. Future events were changing the present. Ow. What the hell?
Oh, another intentional joke. Ha ha ha.
Anyway, when
Ha 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 ha. Ha 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 ha. Aha! Oh, my life is so enhanced. I got to chortle as the humorous person. I hate this planet.
Thomas Young created the double slit experiment, he had no
Oh, again, this word, this verbiage. When he created the simplest experiment you could possibly imagine, almost. It's almost as simple as the most simple experiment you could possibly imagine. I mean, you could make one hole, but yeah, making two holes is a little more complicated. That's pretty sophisticated.
idea the endless series of mysteries he was about to unleash on the world. And he had no
Yes, but frankly, he had no clue what science was, because he didn't even admit that, oh yeah, what I'm drawing doesn't make any sense, because it really doesn't make that pattern, does it? No. Makes a pattern, but it's not that pattern.
idea that these mysteries would shape and confuse our very ideas of the nature of the universe and reality itself.
No, I mean, again, why is this appealing to somebody? Why are they saying, oh yes, that's what you've proven? The universe is all wacky. But again, this is just because all these people need to evade the simple truth. It's a bug planet, and we're just robots. Ugly and stupid ones.
How does conscious observation change the nature of matter? Truth is, we don't know. But it brings up
So again, more nonsense about any observation changing anything. All you're doing is changing its direction. Oh, an asteroid hit the Earth. It's now entangled with the the universe, and now the universe knows what it's doing. And
some fascinating ideas. So now that I've melted your brain, I want to hear what you think. Go ahead and
I think you're such an asshole. Oh, yuck. Very unappealing.
talk it all up in the comments. There are no wrong answers here.
Yes, there's just commercials and ad money and revenue, and that's the important thing. God damn it.
Thanks so much for watching, and
Yeah, thanks for being a dupe and falling for my bullshit and somehow, giving me a grand and easy life. Talking shit.
MLP Luigi for asking an awesome question. If you have a question,
Oh, it was such an awesome question. Could you do what everybody else has already done many and many, many times? Huh?
you can hit me up in the comments or tweet me a question at @JoeScottWriter, and we can get smarter together. If you learn
So his other name is @Joe Ryder, and so he's Joe Scott here, so I don't know. He's probably Joe Smo somewhere.
something in this video, give me a thumbs up.
Oh yeah, tweet me and thumbs up me and, Patreon me and, all that stuff.
That lets Google show it to more people. And if it's your first time here and you like it, put a ring on it and hit subscribe. I come back with stuff like this every single week. The world's
Oh, I'm just depressed. I'm so depressed. Alright, get over it, Gary. Come on, move on. Oh, why? Why do you have to be assholes?
Fascinating place, and I'm here to share that interestingness with you. So you guys go out there, have an eye-opening week, and I'll see you next time. Thanks for watching. Love you guys.
Oh, yeah. I sell used cars on the side.
Take care.
Scott Creative Endeavors. That was a good joke. Oh, it's just so funny. That was so creative. It really was. Wow. Woo. Goosebumpy over the creativeness of it all. Anyway, what else did I want to do? There's this Australian kid. Okay, so I could play some of this. Gets to this whole X-ray diffraction thing. So maybe I'll save that for next time, though. I don't know, or some other time. But really, they really don't understand this whole scatter thing principle at all. People just aren't getting it. That this stuff is going everywhere, and there's just places where you put it back in frequency. I mean, back in phase. And it's really that simple. So what else is there? Yeah, no, it's probably enough. I've lost all interest, frankly. Just even contemplating that this horse shit isn't, like I said, there's so few people that have any energy to say, damn, this is so wrong. This isn't what science should be. It should be so much better than this. It should have the thing called proof and evidence, and it should be piled up, but giant piles of evidence. They shouldn't have to desperately exaggerate and then make up fake experiments that were never done, and then make up fake stories about the experiments that are done. Ugh. Very creepy. All right. I was thinking about LIGO, right? The mirror. I guess I could do that part. Yeah. Just because it's just a thought that came to my head, so I just thought I'd throw it out there. So I turn this on, I believe. Yeah, there we go. All right. So this whole idea of picking up these gravity waves. So you have this. You have the idea is, well, the mirror really should just be reflecting the light once, right? But as we now have found out, they reflect the lights 800 times back and forth, so 1,600 interactions with the mirror. Yeah, which really sounds kind of silly, right? If the mirror is supposed to be moving, well, then on each one of those interactions, they're going to get another vibration that says there was a vibration. So they end up with 1,600 duplications of the same movement in the mirror. So that's really bad. But anyway, the idea is to just suspend the mirror in some way to make it isolated from the tunnel and the ground. Right? Can you see any of that? No, not really. Well, I can fix that. Maybe. That's a little better. All right. So it's kind of important that you don't want earth sounds to get into the mirror. But the truth is because of gravity, there's always going to be tension in whatever you use to suspend the mirror. If you suspend it from below, well, obviously that's a simple enough route, right, for the tension to move through. But it's going to go through here anyway because of gravity. Gravity is always going to keep saying you must be connected to the rest of the world. It's still going to be held by fingers, essentially, and there's still going to be a capacity for any kind of noise out here to just go right through those suspension cables. So the idea is to try to make the noise move at different speeds. So that's really what the cables are meant to do, is to make the noise go slower and slower and faster through different channels. And so the noise, that was this, ends up being broken into little pieces all over the place, And so you want to fragment the noise. Now it's still noise, it's still energy. You can't get rid of it because gravity is going to force it to be real and always effective. So you can't really get rid of it. You can just make it less of a pattern. You can take the patternness out of the pattern. All right, but that's not ideal. The ideal thing would be is to have the mirror in free fall, right? So the ideal way to do the experiment is to hit the mirror, bounce it up, let it go up against gravity, and then you'll have this point where it's not going to move at all. It's just going to stop moving and then go down. And at that point, it's completely, through that whole trip, it was isolated from any noise, right? Any noise that happened out here, now it's isolated from. Gravity really can't make it affect anything much. It's really isolated from any kind of vibrations or anything like that. And that would be the time to hit it with a pulse. Is when it's completely isolated from any noises that happen in the last millisecond. And it could be a second, whatever the time would be, is that you can have this thing sit for, a half a second where it doesn't move much. And that would be the time to hit it. But anyway, that would be a much better system, is to take advantage of gravity in the sense that the mirror, you don't have to have it maintain velocity, and you can just give it a jolt. It'll slow down, stop, and stay there for a second, and then fall. And just take advantage of that isolation that you could create that way. I don't know. I thought it was a better idea. Personally. But anyway, it's just horseshit. The whole thing is horseshit. So I shouldn't even bring it up because it's such a horseshit experiment. But anyway. Alright, so till the next time, and such and so forth and whatnot. Again, all I can do is make rational, reasonable arguments explaining why all of this is so suspect. That they haven't really thought it through. They haven't argued it through. They haven't even put 12 scientists in a room and give them huge incentive, like they're going to get extra chocolate cake if they find a flaw in the reasoning. Like give them a huge incentive to find out how it's wrong, not a huge incentive to say it's right. And then argue this out. Can you find a reasoning flaw? Is there a flaw in our proof? Have we not quite proven something? They never pay anybody to do that. They don't give anybody any incentive to look for the flaw in their analysis. And that should be the number one priority of science. Science should be the first thing it wants to do, is to say, give people every incentive to say, why can't it work? Why doesn't it work? That should be what they're always after, is those counter arguments. But you can't find anybody. There's not a single person making a response video, not a single person doing anything to indicate this is a valid conversation, that anybody should even have these conversations. It's amazing. I just never realized that there's so many people who are so dishonest. Because frankly, like I said, if I get 200 or 250 views for this video, there's got to be a couple of people here who have some scientific background, some knowledge, and none of them can make anything called a rational counter-argument. Bulldozers? That's silly. Yeah, that's not an argument. It's not even close to meaningful. It doesn't say anything. So no matter what I used as an analogy, you would just mock it because it's not the real thing. You're just trying to find you would analogize it much better. Let's say you actually understood the concept, okay, that energy is actually consumed, okay, when something moves slower. There's stuff moving a constant speed in the universe. And now you're going to make that something move slower for a little tiny period of time, and then it's going to reflect. How would you analogize it? What would you use? Tomatoes? Well, I mean, what would be the mechanism you would use to describe that phenomenon? Just to make it understood in simpler terms, that this is what it would be like. It's like. What would be your "it's like" analogy? Because I could use I could use microbes. I could use a paramecium as an example. A paramecium eats a big giant piece of crap, okay, and then swim, and swimming slower, and then it barfs up the big piece of rock that it ate by mistake. I could use other analogies. Why would they be so much superior than the simple one that you have a little mechanical device that runs at a constant speed, and in fact, you're now going to stop it from being able to go that speed because it has to push something heavy, something that doesn't allow it to keep going the speed it's going while it's connected to it. Well, anyway. I won't get an answer. Just more crap. So that's all people have as arguments, is crap. People are crappy. Ugh. And silly. And juvenile. And trivial. Yuck.